we're happy about this. We're happy about this. The ending was happy. We're happy. We're happy it's over. It's the last episode, but... Hello everyone, welcome back, and thank you in advance for watching my recap of the final episode of The King, Eternal Monarch. I don't know about you, but I've been counting down the days for this episode to arrive, and it's finally here! We get it! Now, I had asked y'all if you wanted a reaction video or just another recap video, and I got a lot of people wanting a reaction video, but the thing is, I wanted to give you guys both. And it ended up, I got a project that I had to work on this morning. So for those of you who wanted a reaction video, I'm sorry. I'll see if I can do one of those in the future, because I am needing a new drama to watch now. Now that The King Eternal Monarch is over, what should I do next? Now, in regards to this last episode, I'll go into this a little further at the end of the recap, but I will say this was an epic series. I loved every minute of it. I don't think there was a horrible episode at all in this series. The story, the ending, every loose end was tied up in a pretty little bow at the end of this episode, and I was there for every moment of it. It was great. And now that the series is over, I'm gonna say this, and you know, you haven't seen me review a lot of shows on my channel. A lot of you have only come just for recaps on this specific show, but I watch a lot of Korean dramas, and I have a top 5 list. And this drama is officially on my top 5 list. This is in my top 5 right now. I don't know what drama is going to knock it off the list. I don't think any, because I mean, it has anything and everything you could ever want in a drama, including amazing actors who I love and everybody else adores. And that's why a lot of us are watching this drama, because of the actors in it. They're a huge part of it, as well as the characters, and the story was amazing. I'm a fan. I am a huge fan. So if you have been on the cusp of, ooh, should I watch this drama? And now that all the episodes are out, I can binge watch it. Yeah, put it on the top of your list. Just stop watching this video and go watch it for yourself. And then come back for my recap if you really get confused and need a little help figuring out what happened. I went into a bit of a tangent there. Long story short, I recommend. And let's go ahead and get into what happened in the last episode of The King Eternal Monarch. Let's go. We start the episode off with Luna texting the detective's father, telling him that she's on a stakeout, and when we see Luna, who's the one texting, she looks pretty sick. We then find Kong at the abandoned building crying, and we see he's having flashes of the time that he and the detective had together, and I'm sure he feels like he's never going to see her again, and that's why he's upset. Since we are then taken to the bamboo forest where we see the detective and Yi-rim at his obelisk, and she has him at gunpoint and walks him into the gate. We're then taken back to the kingdom of Korea in 1994, and Young is killing who I at first thought was just a guard, but then I rewound and realized that it was the prince's son who was guarding the back gate to let Yi-rim and the guys escape after stealing the flute. So he dead now. While the king is giving Young orders to stay at the doors and kill the traitors when they try to leave, he also tells Young that if he fails, he needs Young to kill Yi-rim when he heads this way. This is when Young realizes what the king is planning and tells him he's staying by his side and his job is to protect the king. The king says no to this with a tear just ready to spill from his eye, and he says this because this is his last try, and if he can't stop him, he needs Young to stop Yi-rim. This is when Young replies, okay, I understand, but this is also my last time to protect the king. And with that, they both head to where the flute is being stored and towards Yi-rim and the traitors. Meanwhile, in the in-between, we see Yi-rim and the detective in his little in-between space with all the photos. And now that they're on the inside, the detective takes the other half of the flute from Yi-rim and, you know, holds on to it while they wait. Yi-rim asks her what she plans to do, and she says, we're gonna hang out here, and if the king fails to kill you in the past, shoot, shoot, I'm gonna take care of you here. i.e. she's going to kill Yi-rim in the in-between if the king doesn't succeed. So we got backups on backups on backups in regards to how to get rid of Yi-rim if the king does not kill him himself. And now obviously the king doesn't know any of this about the detective, FYI, like she's doing this all on her own. Yi-rim reminds her that if the king succeeds, her memories of him are going to disappear. She replies that she knows, and because this would leave her heartbroken, she believes that her memories of him will actually stay in her heart even if she doesn't actually remember him, which that's really, really romantic. Yi-rim tells her that the gun won't work in the in-between, and she replies with her favorite phrase in regards to what you can and cannot do in the in-between, and that's, has anybody tried to shoot you in the in-between before? You never know, it could be possible. She's very optimistic. We are then taken to when young Egon is picking up his father's sword and trying to stop Yi-rim while crying, which is even more emotional this time around, and we see the order of events change. Remember me mentioning how I saw the glass still breaking in the trailer for this episode, and how I thought the king had said that that part of the plan was not happening this time around? Well, apparently they still do break the glass, but they do it at a different time. So instead of young Egon using the sword and cutting Egon's hand and the flute in half, a piece of glass falls, cutting Yi-rim's hand and causing him to drop the flute while still in one piece. So events change a little bit, but not too much. But the flute does not get cut in half. That's the big part here. We then see Young and the king come in, guns blazing, and holy shit, this was so epic. The camera movements and effects for following both Young and the king as they take down all the guards and Yi-rim's men is insane and totally epic and action-packed for sure. And oh my gosh, Young gets shot so many times. I'm hoping that he's still wearing a bulletproof vest. I'm like 90% sure, but at the time that I was watching it, I had no idea and was like, oh my gosh, Young is gonna die. They're all gonna die. And the fact that the flute was not broken in half seems to affect the flute that the king and the detective have in the in-between, because we see both pieces start to dissolve and burn up and disappear. When Yi-rim sees what happens to his piece of the flute, he kind of comes to the conclusion that one, the flute is no longer in half, and two, they're probably now stuck together in the in-between forever, him and the detective. We see Yi-rim in the past grab the flute, leaving with his guards, and the king chasing after while Young stays with the young Egon and is holding him and checking his pulse and looking a little dire. As he hears the court people calling for the king and the prince, he leaves to go hide, and we see Young in really bad shape hiding behind a wall, or I don't know what it is, but he's leaning up against a wall, still inside the room where the flute was being held, and we see him collapse or pass out. I hope pass out and not die. They don't really tell you anything until the very end. I'm gonna spoil it for you. He doesn't die. Well, at least we don't think he dies. Maybe he does die, because the timeline obviously is altered. Oh gosh, did he die and then the timeline was altered? No, he passes out. He passes out. I'm sticking with that. Meanwhile, in the Republic of Korea universe, Kong has taken his mother to the hospital where her actual son is being treated, and we hear through a VO of Kong telling her everything that happened and how her husband was behind it. And after crying over her real son, she goes after our Kong, asking him how long he knew, how he could let this happen, and to bring her son back. Obviously, she's in a lot of turmoil after finding out the truth, but as he's leaving, it seems she comes to her senses and runs after him, holding him and telling him that he's her son too, and that she's sorry for what she said, and that she knows it's not his fault. So that at least was really nice, since his real mom abandoned him, but this mother still loves him, so that's good for Kong. Back in the Kingdom of Korea, we see Yi-rim in the bamboo forest and the obelisk opening, you know, the eternity one, since the flute is whole this time. The king arrives just in time and cuts Yi-rim's arm, which causes him to drop the flute. Yi-rim asks him who he is and why he has the four-tiger sword. The king replies that he's the king and the sword belongs to him, and he's the one that's there to punish him. Yi-rim reminds him he just killed the king and doesn't fully understand at this moment who Egon or the present king is. At this time, or we think this time, the Yirim in the in-between with the detective is starting to believe that the king failed since he's obviously still there. The detective responds not for long and goes to shoot him. When she pulls the trigger though, it doesn't seem to go off. However, at this moment, when we see Yirim lunging toward her, I think to take this opportunity, we hear the sound of a gun going off and they show the magic lily on her windowsill starting to grow rapidly and little leaves pop out. It's growing. We then see her gun go off and hit Yirim in the in-between, and it seems that time has started back up there. Yirim in the in-between is shot in the chest and dies, and we see everything in the in-between start moving and petals falling from the sky, and the lightning becomes really, really active. Yirim, who's in the past, and the king are still having their little face-off, and Yirim figures out that he's Egon and that this must be the power of the flute. After this realization, the king finally takes his revenge and kills Yirim by beheading him with the 4-tiger sword. Epic. Just desserts for Yirim all around. We then see the yo-yo kid grow from his child state to an adult, looking at his yo-yo, saying he thought it would break, but instead it sprouted, and that the door will close and only memories remain. So it seems that even though the king changed the future, it doesn't fully affect everything the way the flute or yo-yo kid thought it would, and this leads to the yo-yo kid or flute essence to decide how to handle it. Should he change the timeline and erase everyone's memory of the current one, or should he let some of them keep their memories of this timeline? This whole time, the fear has been, especially for the detective, that if the king changed the past, that would alter the future, that she would forget about him. And so I think what the flute or yo-yo kid is trying to decide is, well, should I do what really I should do and erase everyone's memories? And, you know, have this new future exist without anyone remembering that there used to be another future? Or should I let some of these people keep their memories and stay together? After the stuff with the yo-yo kid or flute essence, whatever you want to call him, we are then taken back to the king standing over Yirim's body and also seeing Yirim's body in the in-between disappear into cool burning paper pieces. Really awesome SFX there. Like, that was a cool death scene for Yirim for sure. The one in the in-between I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure that the one in the past just was a dead body, but that was cool how they handled that. Now, at this point, the detective doesn't have a flute piece anymore, and it seems like she's stuck in the in-between, since no Yirim, no flute equals no gate opening. So the king has succeeded in stopping Yirim, and we see the future change, starting with his scar, which disappears, and his notes on the chalkboard with the time freezing math, and everything else that happened after the flute was cut in half never happened. It's all changed. So Kong never ended up in the Republic of Korea either. However, it seems some things were completely changed because we are taken back to the Republic of Korea in 1994, and it seems that Egon's father's doppelganger still does die. We see Song laughing while washing the dishes like we did before when Yirim had gone through and killed him. We see Yirim's doppelganger in the house, in the wheelchair, and Song telling him how her and her son now have nowhere else to go and he'll have to leave, but that he shouldn't worry, and promises him that she won't do what her brother did. And we see her then taking him to a hospital to be cared for and telling him that she'll visit him every month along with her son. At around the same time, we see Kong's past change. Instead of Yirim stopping his mother from trying to throw him off the bridge, it's the prince and his guards. As the prince talks to young Kong and his mother, he tells her about how your choices mold your destiny, but you don't get to choose your parents, and that she needs to make better choices since it affects her son, and offers to take her for a cup of tea. And it seems like the prince does influence Kong's future and life in this moment instead of Yirim. So positive vibes all around. We are then taken to 1999, and we see the prime minister and her mother when the prime minister is still young, and she catches a young Luna stealing her mother's money. When the prime minister goes to stop her, her mother intervenes and talks with young Luna, finding out her name while her daughter is very rude to her, saying she doesn't have a name, she's homeless and a street rat and a thief, like what can you expect from her? Her mom, being very understanding, offers Luna some food and gives her the money for later. And while her daughter is being very rude and not understanding, saying she's going to call the police, Luna ends up giving the mother some of the money back, saying she's paying for the food that she's about to be given. The mother is touched by this, and you see little Luna affected by this encounter in a good way. Someone's actually caring for her. Meanwhile, we see the detective regaining consciousness outside in the bamboo forest with blood on her and her gun out in the open with people surrounding her. She asks quickly if she's in the Republic of Korea and what year it was. She's told she is in Korea and it's April 2020. This is when she shows her police badge and asks to borrow someone's cell phone, and she calls her boss. When he picks up, she quickly asks where everyone is, Jung-mi, Kong. We don't hear what her boss says, but it doesn't seem to be the best news because we see her face drop and she starts to cry as she puts the phone down. In a VO, we hear that only a week in the universe had passed, and we see scenes of her back at work. Bringing out the girl we saw previously who had killed her roommate, only this time it seems that she had a different motive for killing her roommate, who they're both actresses now. Instead of this woman being killed by Yeom's henchmen, she's obviously still alive, but being taken to jail for murdering her roommate just at a different time. The detective tells us, the viewer, about how some things have changed, but others haven't. She's still a lieutenant and she spends time with her dad, and we see that she still has the magic lily planted and it's finally started to grow. It also seems that she still has her memories of the previous timeline. The wife of the detective's boss is still trying to catch her husband in his lie about where he's going at night, and asks the detective, as she gets a report from her, if she's the one who's been calling her husband out in the evenings. The detective says, yeah, that was me, covering for her boss, like the good employee that she is. We see she's looking at his credit card report and says out loud, after looking at the recent charges, that whoever he's actually seen must be starting school soon, since it looked to be purchases of things you would buy a kid, like new sneakers, clothes, etc. when school starts. So could be he's got a love child out there, who knows? Either way, she goes to confront her husband at the place where he's been going, and apparently it's the sister and grandmother of someone who had gotten arrested by him, and this guy had asked him to look out for his family while he was in jail. So he was just trying to help someone, but being sneaky about it. We then see the detective walking down the street, and she runs into the king's doppelganger, who is alive in this timeline wearing a Navy uniform. He makes quick eye contact with her, but keeps walking, not recognizing her since, it's not the king. This does cause her to have flashbacks of what the king said, promising he'd get back to her even if that meant opening every door to the universe, and her thinking about this and wondering, why isn't he here now then? Seeing his doppelganger obviously causes her to break down crying and missing him. We see the king in the in-between, or the completed in-between, since he has the whole flute and he's riding through it. It seems he's been doing what he promised and is trying to find the universe door that will take him to the detective. We see him winding up in some different universes, standing in front of the detective's house with flowers, and it not being the right detective. We see her in a bunch of different forms, fashions, jobs. There's a really funny scene where in one universe, she's apparently an actress and she's coming home drunk after winning an award, and she's just a hot mess, really dramatic. After we see the king attempt a couple times to find the detective, we're then taken to the year after in the Republic of Korea, so 2021, and the detective gets a call from Nari saying, or I guess warning her, that she thinks that her father might have purchased a horse, because there's a guy with a white horse on her lawn right now and she doesn't really know what's going on there. When she hears this, she's like, Nari, I gotta go, and puts on her police siren thingy and uses it to speed home. When he first sees the detective, he tells her that she exists in every universe, but none of them seem to recognize him, but they all seemed happy, and that was the only thing that had been comforting him all this time. He also notices how the detective is looking at him as if she recognizes him, and he asks her why, like maybe she knows his doppelganger in this universe or something. He then goes to look at her badge, and he sees that it's her badge and that she's wearing the necklace he gave her, and it's really her. The detective starts crying, saying, finally, you made it, and they go in for a very, very sweet embrace. And she asks him what took him so long. He tells her that after killing Yiram, he had to go back for Young and then find the right door to her universe. And he also thought that she wouldn't remember him since the timeline had changed. He says that even if she had forgotten him though, he would have reminded her and kind of started all over in the process of getting her to believe who he was. After telling her all this, he finally does ask how she remembers him since the two universes flow differently now. And instead of explaining, she says, let's just skip that part since she's been through some stuff too. And to hit this home, pulls him in for a big smooch and another long embrace. The king, still holding the flowers, asks her if she still hates flowers, and she finally admits that she actually does and that those are her favorite. He hands them to her and tells her he's deeply in love with her, and this is sort of her sign that they have finally reached their fate, their destiny. So remember that CCTV footage from episode 9? Apparently it was Luna, and it's the Luna from this new timeline. We're taken to the kingdom of Korea in 2022, and we hear a conversation between the king and Young, and apparently Young now also has twin siblings in this new future because his parents get back together. The king asks what their names are, and he says they go by their nicknames, which are the same nicknames as Unsoop's siblings. The king asks him at this moment if he misses Unsoop. Young says he does, but you know, it doesn't matter because he wouldn't remember him. So it seems that Young remembers the original timeline as well for some reason. So maybe this is what the yo-yo kid or the flute was talking about earlier. Like, he didn't erase everyone's memories of the previous timeline, and that's why Young, the detective, and King remember. It's never fully explained, but that's what I think they were talking about, or what the yo-yo kid was talking about earlier in the episode. Like, this is what he was mentioning. So the main reason Young was there meeting with the king was to give the king a personal file of Kong's, who's now apparently a police officer in the kingdom of Korea. We see Kong meeting up with Luna outside of the bookstore on the same day that we saw in the CCTV footage, and he's apparently visiting her on her day off because of something she did or submitted at work. We see Kong give her a hard time about a piece of paper that I'm not too sure what's on it. It could be a warrant or something. They didn't translate it, so I'm not 100% sure, but it does have to do with her job. And we find out it's her birthday, May 27th, 2022, and he's there to buy her a gift, and when she hears this, she goes into the bookstore to pick something out. It looks like Kong and Luna are working together at the police station like they were in Korea, and who knows, maybe little sparks fly between them. You know? It also seems that Luna and the Prime Minister grew up together in this timeline, and the PM, or Guseo Ryong, took a much different path because Luna visits her in jail, and apparently she's in there for stealing the money that people have been paying for taxes, and that in this timeline she's an assembly woman, and we also see that her assistant is now one of the guards at her prison. We then are taken to the Republic of Korea universe, where the detective is training a new recruit, and he asks where she goes every weekend because their boss wants to know. She tells him she goes on a trip every weekend, and we see the king getting dressed to go somewhere as well. The head court lady is giving him a hard time since apparently whenever he leaves on the weekend, he ends up giving away all the buttons on his jacket every time, which of course are made of diamonds because he's rich. And he's not coming back until dawn, which she's worried about as well. He doesn't tell her where he's going, but gives her a big hug and says that no matter what, to tell everyone he's in the study over the weekend. While hugging and saying goodbye, we see her slip something into his pocket and asks him to at least sew the buttons on his sleeves first so that he can keep his jacket buttoned up. It seems she's also still up to her old tricks and sneaking relationship charms, and he pulls it out of his jacket. So she's still being her usual self, and I guess doesn't remember what happened in the previous timeline. So there seems to be only 3 people that remember. However, she is still from the Republic of Korea, but I guess we're pretending to not know that anymore since she doesn't seem to know what the king is really doing. We find out that every weekend the king and detective have been going through the obelisk and going back in time into other universes, and that's how they've been spending their time together. They've been going on these kind of long weekend trip dates. We see them figuring out what time they're in by the type of payphone outside of the bamboo forest so that they don't end up in a time or place that they might run into their former selves or doppelgangers. But in one instance, they can't seem to figure out what time period the payphone is from, and while the detective is looking for a newspaper, the king gets recognized. As he goes to tell the detective, she informs him that he's apparently a tyrant here and they need to get out of there. Egon concludes this must have happened because this doppelganger didn't have the head court lady and the detective's badge growing up, and must have grown up really scared and lonely, and that's why he's a tyrant. So with this newspaper, he covers up his face and they try to get back to the obelisk as quickly as possible. In this same trip, we see it's the year 2000 and the king takes the detective to see the prince, who is at his usual coffee shop. It seems like he's still gone in this new timeline, I guess, but he tells the detective after seeing him that she had just met the prince and his uncle, and that when he was alive, he had wanted to meet her, so this is his way of doing it. So it seems that the prince still dies, but they don't say why. After her seeing the prince and the detective and king being lovey-dovey in the cafe a bit, the detective says that she wants to visit the Joseon dynasty or the Joseon period, and the king asks why, and it's because she wants to talk to her great-grandfather about getting a pear field in a certain area of Korea when he's older. While looking through the luggage of period clothing they seem to have in the in-between, the detective finds a bunch of leaves, and according to the king, you can never be too careful, and we might go so far back that that's our clothing. During another trip, we see the king run into young Kong Shin-jae, who is Kong's doppelganger in the Republic of Korea. He's wearing a taekwondo uniform, and after getting the baseball he lost from the king, he stops instead of walking up the road to offer the king some help in finding the right bus route. But before the king can tell him where he's heading, we hear an accident happen behind Kong and his doppelganger goes home to report it. When the detective comes back and meets up with the king, he tells her he thinks that the in-between chose this time and place for a reason, since I think that that car crash may have actually been the accident that had put Kong from the Republic of Korea in a coma. So the flute or something in the universe brought him there for a reason, and that was to stop it. You know, because he was chatting with the king, he didn't go up the road like he would have and maybe have gotten hit by that car if he hadn't stopped to be like, hey, do you want some directions? The king being there at that time and place seemed to have had a purpose. We also see the king visit Unsoop, and he doesn't seem to have his memories of the king, so of course Unsoop, you know, reacts to him in a true Unsoop fashion, and as the king is leaving, calls him a lunatic. What's really cute is it seems that him and Nari are together in the future, because when the king is talking to Unsoop, they're interrupted by a phone call that is Nari on the other line, and he's being all gushy and sweet with her, and it's just adorable. I freaking loved it. Oh, it's so cute. As they are coming back out of the obelisk in the next scene with the king missing more buttons, he stops her from going further because he sees flashlights that look like the ones the royal guards use, and realize they've caught up and are kind of back in his universe in his time. So he tries to hide the detective behind his coat and tells everyone to step back. He tells Young he'll take the long route, and yes, it is that kind of situation. As the detective peeks out and sort of waves at Young. So cute. He then sneaks her into the palace, and after they get their bearings, they try to figure out, okay, if Young caught us, who's gonna catch us next? And as if she knew, the head court lady appears with snacks. The detective quickly puts on the king's LED mask so that the head court lady doesn't see her face, and the king replies, looks like your charms are working, and look, she's wearing the mask that only I wear, so I must really like her. The head court lady isn't upset by this. She's actually very happy that the king has a girl with him, and this is when the detective realizes they need to erase the CCTV footage since Luna exists in this universe, and she doesn't want to get her in trouble. So with their mission of they need to delete the CCTV footage of them coming out of the bamboo forest, they head to the control room that I guess exists in the palace. This is when they see Young on the CCTV footage, and the king asks the detective to try and read his lips. I don't really know what exactly he was saying to the guard. He obviously was upset and holding up a piece of paper. The detective thought that she could read his lips. When she tells him what she thinks Young might be saying, the king is like, no, and that Young would never say that and would never keep anything from me. As he's saying this very confidently, we then see Young have a little hallway hand touch encounter with Nari's doppelganger, which the king is obviously surprised to see. And it's like their own little drama in the control room. The detective jokes that she's trying to figure out what type of drama they're watching on the CCTV footage. Is it a romantic comedy or a spy thriller? The king says it's a melodrama and lifts her up onto the desk, and they have a little makeout session in the control room. Oh! We then see them parting ways since the weekend is over. We then see them living their separate lives in their separate universes, the detective chasing down bad guys, as she usually does, and the king appointing the new prime minister, who it happens to be his old secretary. I think in this universe, she's never his secretary though. And when she goes to tell him that she's going to be the type of PM that does a lot of written reports and not in person, he says, "I'd rather you give me personal reports so that we can split some half and half." Obviously, he remembers her from the other timeline and wants to be around her, and I'm, I think, pretty happy that she's the new prime minister. And with that, they end this amazing series with the king and detective very far in the past, hand in hand and happy. We see their hands age in front of us, signifying that they're together for the rest of their lives. And that's how they end it. It's beautiful, sorry. I've obviously already cried a couple times. I have waterproof mascara, but it has not been tested. Ugh. They don't exactly explain why Young, the detective, and King all get to keep their memories, but I think it is because the yo-yo kid was like, love should prevail and they shouldn't have to go through that. This episode was basically about putting a ribbon on everybody's life, making sure that everyone gets a happy ending in a small way or another. Everything is covered, and I love how everyone's life ends up in this new timeline. I feel like this feels obvious to me, but this was a fantastic series. The writers did a really great job with the story, and I'm so happy with the ending. The whole episode, I was smiling ear to ear, even through the action scenes and seeing Yi-Rim get beheaded. I was like, yeah, it's happening. Just full of so much joy, and then at the end, tears. It was a little like when I watched When the Camellia Blooms, where yes, things are sweet and sad during the series, but I didn't cry or anything until that last episode. This ending. I didn't cry at all through this series in this last freaking episode. Oh my God. When everything went down in that last episode, I was just a mess. The twists they had in this show had me not able to guess what was going to happen, and I loved the little hints that they threw in that obviously it all came full circle here in the last episode. So great, so amazing. Honestly, the only gripe I have, and it's not even really a gripe, is I still felt like they made the king too smart. I mean, he never seemed surprised by anything, and that was a little annoying at the start. But they did eventually give him these moments where he was so confident and then was just knocked down immediately and proven wrong in very humorous ways. So I'm glad that they incorporated that, because if he had just been stoic and right all the time through the whole series, I would have been like, this is annoying. Like, these are annoying qualities. But those qualities I ended up loving, and I mean, Lee Min-ho, that's why we're all here, everybody. He's freaking amazing. I was here for him. All of you were here for him. He did an amazing job. He is forever my eternal monarch. The detective and the actor playing her did a fantastic job, and is definitely one of my favorite Korean actors for this reason. She made this character and what she was going through so real and realistic in such a crazy environment, and her character development was amazing. Lee Min-ho and Kim Go-eun's chemistry was just phenomenal, and I feel like some people were kind of ragging on her, but I honestly want to see them in another drama. Like, I want to see them together forever. I also want to give a big shout out to Lee Jung-jin, who played Yi-Rim. He is one of my favorite villains, and he had me scared up until the very end. And I think I liked him because he wasn't too crazy in his evilness. He had his moments, and I think those moments were so scary and almost too real, like his violent outbursts, his character, just everything. It wasn't too over the top. I personally have gripes about when the evil villain is caught in the hero's net and somehow gets away until the very end. And in these circumstances, I think that Yi-Rim and his character was just steps ahead of the king, and I liked how they incorporated that. And yes, Yi-Rim does get caught in the end, and he does pay for his crimes, but I really wasn't sure if it was going to happen or not until the very end. And finally, the king kind of caught up to him, and I think Yi-Rim was starting to slip up, and that's how it happened. So his character and how it was related to the king and his development in the series, phenomenal. Now, I loved all the characters, obviously, and the actors playing them, but by far, my favorite was Unsoop. Not only was he amazing comic relief, but his scene saying goodbye to Young was honestly the only part in the series that I burst into tears. I honestly haven't seen him in anything before. I saw in his credits that he was in Drama World, which I have watched, but I don't remember him in, so I am a new fan and will be looking out for new dramas that he's in for sure. And with that, I'm going to end this video. I'm so sad the series is over and I honestly don't know what to recap next. I am doing Mystic Pop-Up Bar, but this was so epic and recapping it was so much fun. Thank you everyone for sharing your theories and your very supportive comments in these videos. It's been so great meeting this new community down below. And just, it's been a wild ride, I gotta say. I'm obviously very emotional from the ending. My voice is cracking. So yeah, I don't know what to watch next. Do you guys have any suggestions? Are there any upcoming dramas that you want me to recap that you think I'd be interested in? I do have access to Viki and Netflix, but I might take a little break after this and just rewatch this series one more time and see if there's stuff that I might have missed. But this has been great, y'all. I've really enjoyed this series. I've really enjoyed doing these recaps for you guys. Thank you so much for watching and your support, and make sure to subscribe for more future recaps if you enjoyed this one. Again, I am recapping Mystic Pop-Up Bar as well, so if you're curious about that show, check out my playlist of what I have so far, which is up to, I think, episode 8. And I'm gonna go cry a little bit while I edit this. Hopefully I don't cry because I see myself almost cry. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.